Fernando Alonso is the absolute rock star of the 2023 season, with a two-time world champion already bagging 2 podium finishes for Aston Martin, something that was a distant goal in the previous 2 seasons for the Silverstone-based outfit. However, while this is massively huge news for the team, the owner may not be very happy with the outcome of the race after all, especially because it's not his son that's up there with the same car that Alonso is able to drive the wheels off weekend after weekend. Therefore, the dissatisfaction of Alonso in Lawrence Stroll may grow thick as the season goes by, and in order to protect his son's driving career, he may be forced to do some actions that would reflect poorly on the team. Now, when Alonso was signed as a replacement for Sebastian Vettel, everyone was left baffled when the two-time world champion said that in the near future, Aston Martin will definitely fight for championships, and the potential of the team is on the highest possible level. Since switching to Aston Martin, the Spaniard was able to rack up 2 podium finishes in 2 races, while his teammate Lance Stroll was only able to finish P6 in the first race and a DNF in Saudi Arabia. Although the second outcome was definitely not his fault, and that's something that could easily happen to Alonso as well, it's evident that Stroll is miles away from his teammate, and while this shouldn't surprise us, even though Alonso is 41 years old, it's definitely bad news for the Canadian driver. Now, in his early days in Williams, he did show some potential, but ever since his father got involved in managing and owning the teams that Stroll drives for, it's evident that the comfort zone got the best out of him. While Vettel was in a declining mode with Aston Martin, without this scenario being his fault, as the team was in the worst possible place in 2021 and 2022, Stroll was given the pass card because the team just wasn't able to score a decent amount of points. But now that Alonso has shown that the AMR 23 will definitely be one of the cars, apart from the RB19, that can stand on the highest place on the podium, Stroll's racing career has been put in jeopardy all of a sudden. This is something that Peter Winter, a former Williams and Ferrari team manager, has spoken about, saying that just because Alonso has done 2 consecutive P3 finishes in the 2023 start of the season doesn't mean that Lawrence Stroll is going to be utterly happy about it. Since switching to Aston Martin from Alpine, Alonso has turned back the clock with vintage overtakes on Russell and his old nemesis Hamilton, and the last time that Alonso claimed 2 consecutive podiums was all the way back in 2013 during his penultimate season with Ferrari. As incredible his results are, they may not reflect the best scenario for the owner of the team, and now that his son has fully healed from the bicycle injury that prevented him from performing at the maximum level in Bahrain, the challenge to be better than one of the best drivers that the sport has ever seen will be a tough cookie to crack for Lance Stroll. Even though he did have a great start of the 2023 season following the recovery of the injury as he finished P6, it was evident that Stroll would have finished behind Alonso even if the reliability issues didn't force him to retire prematurely from the race. When talking about the potential drama that is brewing up in Aston Martin, Winter said, "At the end of the race, with all the Aston Martin mechanics in green in front of the podium and Fernando being Mr. Charm, Mr. Charisma with a fluorescent green Aston Martin cap and smile and just looking $100 million, you had to think, not sure Stroll Sr. will be happy about the way things are going at the moment. This is Fernando almost becoming bigger than the team, and Stroll will be thinking, what is happening with my son? Why is he retired? What's going on? I'm probably exaggerating there, and probably it will not be that, but I'm just suggesting that it's a sign that it's a very different sort of team." Well, one thing Alonso does bring to the table is competitiveness, and at the age of 41, he's looking as young as ever. The fact that he signed 3 years of commitment to Aston Martin in times where Alpine was considered a much bigger and greater team only went on to show that Alonso knew what was about to happen in 2023, and it's kind of like him predicting the downfall of the Enstone-based squad and the uprise of the Silverstone-based one. But you don't get to become a 2-time world champion if you have no idea how to race or be present in the sport. So, yet again, everyone had a fair share of laughter when Alonso said that his plan is to win the championship with Aston Martin as he's fallen in love with the project that they presented to him. It's a bit painful that we don't get to see Vettel enjoying the results that Alonso currently does with Aston Martin, but nothing much can be done here as we get to move on with the reality of life. And the reality of life, however, isn't too bright for Lance Stroll as all things stand. As of now, he was constantly being outperformed by his teammates, and it was very evident that he won't lose his driving spot due to the presence of his father. But when you have a superstar like Fernando Alonso doing what he does, you couldn't help but wonder, is Lawrence forced to make a move that no other team owner in the world would want to implement? Fire his own son. While we're dreaming here a bit, if that is what the team needs, that may be the outcome that the team will receive. In times where every place matters and every point is considered as a precious gem, the last thing that Aston Martin needs right now is to have a one-man show, with the son of the owner constantly lacking performance and not being competitive at all. Plus, remember that in times where Stroll was actually competitive, such was the case with Vettel last year in Brazil and Hungary when they fought for the last point. The Canadian didn't choose the tools to protect his place as long as he was ahead. He pushed his own teammate into the grass in Brazil, and his aggressive defense in Hungary did raise some eyebrows as to whether it was a proper one on the four-time world champion's back. Furthermore, Aston Martin doesn't seem to stop anywhere soon in terms of competitiveness, as they're going to bring a lot of upgrades on the AMR 23, with Alonso labeling the current car as a basic version of what the team is capable of. With this in mind, Aston Martin raising the performance and the pace of their car could only mean one thing: more would be expected out of Stroll, and less could be delivered by his side given the history of his matchups with teammates that are proven championship winners. Mike Crack spoke about Aston Martin catching up to Red Bull after the Silverstone-based squad has hired a lot of staff that used to work back in the Milton Keynes factory, as he went on to add, "It's a good question if they're catchable. Now, the development race is going on. We're battling here with people who have different firepower than we have in terms of infrastructure, also being used to doing that. I think we need to be careful of making too many predictions in that regard. It can be managed to keep that gap, but can we close it? We'll work hard. We've seen last year that we can close the gap to some cars in front of us, but just because we did it last year doesn't mean we can do it again." What Aston Martin has been doing in 2023 is very impressive, given the fact that they do not have their own wind tunnel, as they're borrowing this property from Mercedes, and the majority of the car's parts come from this manufacturer as well. Therefore, them outperforming the company they buy and use almost every source needed to successfully drive an F1 car is truly outstanding. And while we're here applauding what Alonso has done in the first two races, Lawrence Stroll is very likely sitting at his home and thinking what could be done next to keep his son's relevance in the sport. Lance has always been labelled as a talented driver, but now a lot of challenges have started to pile up on his back, and we cannot help but wonder what is next for the Canadian. Outperforming a two-time world champion like Alonso would be practically a mission impossible for him, and with this in mind, some disturbing changes may come to Aston Martin by their owner, something that we'd be disgusted to see. So what do you think about Stroll's actions against Alonso? Do you think that the two-time world champion will live on to win the third championship with Aston Martin anytime soon? Well, let us know in the comments down below.